Hello, this is Kathleen, and I'm so glad to be here to go on with the third style in our StyleWise series. We're going to do steampunk now, and I have to tell you, I am partial to steampunk. I love it. Steampunk is an aesthetic that combines historical elements, particularly from the Victorian era. So anything Victorian, you combine with the industrial innovations of that time, the scientific and exploration adventures, and all of the things that were powered by steam and industry. And you combine that together with a kind of futuristic imagination. So honestly, the essence of steampunk is kind of storytelling and world building. So it's an imaginative thing. And some of us, haven't trained our imaginations for some time. I think sometimes we get into these little ruts in life and we don't take adventures with our imagination, but steampunk allows us to do that, and I just love it. So let's just go quickly through some of the characteristically steampunk elements. So let me come up close so that you can get a screenshot. Here's the top part of the worksheet and the bottom. Unlike eclectic, where, it was entirely open to whatever you might like to do, steampunk can be kind of specific. And to be honest, sometimes people will let you know exactly how steampunk is. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to be a steampunk snob, but there are certain elements that kind of are necessary to having it be recognized as, oh, that's steampunk. So if that's what you want, then let me kind of go over some of those things. Let me have you look at the style board again too. So we have all of these things that kind of evoke, the aesthetic of Victorian, but inspired with all of the steampunk machinery and the science things, the adventures. Yeah, so the dominant colors. The dominant colors are those colors that were popular in Victorian times. Definitely the metals, brass, copper, all of the metals, brushed metals and rough metals, embossed metals, copper patina, certainly because obviously it would be aged, rich browns and tans, dark red, burgundy, dark greens, navy, gray, midnight blue, rust, of course, sepia, ivory, deep mustard yellow, ivory, antique white, black, and charcoal. So you might have noticed then that all of these colors are a little bit dark. Yeah, even the yellow is a dark yellow. It's a gold yellow. I'm not really sure how this is coming across on your monitor, but it should be dark. And why? Why would it be dark? Why wouldn't you have pastel colors, for instance? And the answer to that comes from the Victorian age. The cities were kind of dirty. There was a lot of soot, there was a lot of dirt, and pale colors just wouldn't have been practical. And so during that time, they wore dark colors and they decorated their homes in this rich, elegant, kind of dark colors. So those are the kind of the colors of steampunk. Now, the typical motifs are again related to the Victorian influence. Now, when I talk about Victorian steampunk, I'm talking about that era. And so in Europe, obviously it would have been during that same time, mid to late 1800s, and in America, same thing. So in America, steampunk was in the Wild West, and in France, for instance, it was in Paris and some of the other larger cities. So that's kind of what we're talking about when we talk about steampunk. So anything to do with that era, any historical, vintage, and antique items will fit. So steam engines particularly, because of course it was the age of steam, machinery, boilers and valves, antique instruments, and particularly rustic instruments, just anything that would have been in use as a tool during that time. We have riveted metal, filigree, goggles, pocket watches, because of course anything to do with time helps us to time travel right back to this era and tell our stories. Tassels and fringes. In the Victorian parlor or public rooms, everything was rich and elegant. So heavy velvet drapes and soft upholstered furniture, floral designs, stained glass. You have all the scientific equipment. And in the fashion, there were corsets and top hats, waistcoats, and alchemy symbols. So all of the scientific kinds of instruments, compasses, everything exploration related or adventure related that is pure steampunk at this point. Yeah, okay, now textures would be leather, wood, metal, chain and wire, rivets and bolts, exposed brick, ironwork, velvet, textured papers like parchment or other handmade type textures, heavy velvet, lace, embossed, definitely patina and rust, embroidery, and the brocade. Any of the real extravagant, elegant kinds of textures. Other common elements. So steampunk is kind of a storytelling. I'm not all that great at storytelling, but I do like to build worlds. This steampunk aesthetic just combines all of these historical elements, and it combines it with futuristic innovations. And so anything Victorian, like the fleur-de-lis, the damask prints, acanthus leaves, urns, palms, ferns, drapery. So think of a Victorian library or parlor and you'll have the right look. So we've got imaginary vehicles. We have mechanical creatures. Anything that would symbolize innovation, exploration, or even futuristic technology. So think of yourself as a person in the Victorian times, but still using a computer or a telephone, those kinds of things. Exotic and global influences, because the Victorians were many of them were adventurous and went on these large expeditions around the world, and so they brought home all of these global kinds of exotic things. The idea for steampunk, in my mind, I just am always looking for inspiration. So you can go to Pinterest and maybe make a steampunk Pinterest board. You could look through books and magazines. So I always have my eye out for books that would be good for steampunk. So this is one, the American Science and Invention book. It's just a historical book about invention in America, but it has all of these pictures that, would be great steampunk images, Victorian people, just inventions that people made as they were trying to make their lives better, easier. Anything to do with railroad, air travel, like balloons, dirigibles, those kinds of things. So hot air balloons and trains, those were the methods of transportation. Just automobiles were just getting their start. And so all of those things are fair game to steampunkers. Once you start getting inspired by different things, then you can start collecting things. And so let me just, I just pulled all of the steampunk tags that I kind of keep in my stash because I just kind of like to look at them, kind of pet them occasionally. So these are just some examples of things that could be steampunk. Tim Holtz designs really lend themselves to steampunk. So look for things in your stash that you might have that would be Tim Holtz, and that'll be perfect. I just have made this little tiny notepad, little journal, go into a pocket or something. So sometimes we can't find specifically steampunk things. You know, honestly, the easiest way to make a steampunk journal would be to get a kit. And there are so many digital kits that are steampunk related, and that's, you know, perfectly fine. You can find lots of steampunk images in digital kits on the internet, but sometimes we don't have that opportunity, and I kind of like to see what I can do on my own sometimes. So I just take this sheet and I think about the colors, and I choose some of those colors. I think about the typical motifs, the textures, the elements, and then I just kind of try to put that together myself sometimes. So here I have the turquoise kind of patina color, and I found in a magazine this picture of a wing. I only have one, but I have attached it here to this little stamp. Numbers, anything number related is very steampunk. And some just vintage texture stamps, like a postmark, those kind of things work really well for steampunk. So if you don't have kits or a way to, you know, get some of those, then just make your own. So I do have some stencils, and here I've made like a ghost print of that stencil. Again, I've used numbers here and ribbon, the patina color. Stripes is another kind of texture that was popular in Victorian times, just these narrow stripes. Here's a vintage washi tape, numbers again. Maps, that's another motif that's popular. These sea creatures. The octopus is steampunk because of Jules Verne's book, 10,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And so Jules Verne was considered one of the early steampunkers. He didn't know it, but we've all assigned that to him. Yeah, so you can use any of those images and it becomes an immediate steampunk kind of thing. Here's just a picture of a fantastical kind of hot air balloon. Again, numbers. Here's just the railroad journey. Everything adventurous is perfectly steampunk. Yeah. Quotes that have this reference to imagination and adventure, those are very steampunk. This is just some clock stamps. The top hat, the pocket watch, the number. Yeah. So these are all just inspiration to get you kind of thinking about what you might have in your stash that would be steampunk. The light bulb, the moment of truth. Steampunk is really related to invention. A lot of things that are just vintage can be kind of made a little bit more steampunky by adding some of these other motifs. This is really simple, but it could be very steampunk. It would fit just fine in a steampunk. Yeah. We just made this one not long ago. Natural things like trees and leaves and birds and insects and feathers and all of those things can be very steampunk. And particularly, you know, if you put another little gear stamp right there. Yeah. Again, here's a hot air balloon. This is the acanthus leaf frame here. Numbers, script. Very steampunk. Here's kind of a steampunk lady. So feminine can be steampunk as well. Just some antique tools. Reckless. Bicycles, anything with, you know, Victorian transportation is steampunk. I love making steampunk things. Yeah. So here again we have this type font, yeah, and numbers. Very steampunk. Antique instrument of some kind. Keys. Yeah, keys are another motif. Paris. I don't know really why, but Paris and things French, again, are steampunk. Yeah. Just, now it's really just kind of the colors that lends itself to steampunk here. Okay, I hope that was kind of helpful. Gives you some inspiration and some ideas about what to start to collect. I don't have a mood bin for steampunk because my whole little studio here is kind of oriented towards steampunk, so I have it around me all the time. And I have 4 different bins. I have these 2 drawers with things that seem steampunk to me. I have 2 more tubs of things. So these are things that could be steampunk. Feathers, this kind of houndstooth print. I have pulled these out of the paper flowers because those seem very much steampunk to me. This is just a postcard, but you can see this architectural, anything that was Victorian, like these columns and urns and pillars. Those are all very Victorian, and yeah, so light bulb. There's digital prints. I made this one, so there's digital files that you can get and do yourself. Here's a little, this came in a swap, I think, so it's just a little, got a little snap on it. So anything metal, little metal pieces, stickers like this, you know, sometimes you can find. You can just see there's all kinds of things in here, so I don't necessarily, you know, pull them all out, but I just kind of often will keep scraps that seem kind of steampunk. So I don't have necessarily a mood bin for this next steampunk journal. But I will just encourage you to take some of these elements and go through your stash and see what you might have already that could fit this aesthetic. And I'm going to challenge you, if you don't want to do a journal, that's okay, but at least do a tag or a little, folded folio or some other small project that would be steampunk. And let's just see if your imagination doesn't get sparked. Thanks for being with me today. I have pulled some papers at least to get started on the signature. And I have made some papers, some rusted paper, some patina paper, and I want to show you how to do that so that you can make your own steampunk elements. So I have 3 videos coming up, the first 2 on painting paper. That gives you some rusted paper and patina paper. And then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how to rust metal, and then another one on how to find the steampunk elements that you need. So collecting for steampunk. So I'm looking forward to that, and I hope you'll join me in this next fun steampunk adventure.